Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to have you once again on Life Lessons Oladapo podcast. And today it's an awesome session with Frank Inyo. And we're going to be talking about our language experience from beginner to fluent, our journey to language mastery. So in this episode, we're going to be going through how we learned several languages and our interests and strategies for those who might be learning languages. So first of all, I'd love to welcome you, Frank. So how are you doing? Can you give a shout out to the audience?
Hello, everyone. I'm Frank, popularly known as Frankinho. All right. I'm good. Thanks for asking. And thanks for having me here.
Awesome. So could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm from Benue State. I'm an engineering student. I speak a lot of languages and I'm also learning a lot of languages. It's kind of like my hobby. And I'm 23 years old.
Awesome. But I think saying a lot of languages is kind of vague. So I want to be specific because it speaks many languages indeed. So how many languages?
Let me see. English, Portuguese, Spanish, Hindi, TIV. About 6, I think. 6.
Awesome. So that's a lot. I can't even speak up to that. So having said that, so I would love to ask the first question, which is, what sparked your initial interest in learning languages? And was it a personal connection, maybe a cultural fascination, or a practical need?
Okay. Well, it was just a hobby. I started learning languages in the year 2020 during lockdown. It was the year of COVID-19. I believe you know that. So we were at home, nothing to do. I was kind of bored, and I remembered I loved the Hindi language so much because we were watching like a movie a certain time ago, and I saw a phrase in Hindi. It captured my attention, so I was so curious to find out what that phrase meant, and it led me into learning Hindi, which was the first language I learned.
Awesome. Okay, so for me, I actually think it's many things. Perhaps maybe my family history. So as we all know, or many people know, there's a Salvador in my name. And many people don't think that's my first name, but it's not. Salvador is my surname. And the history behind the name is my family, my great-great-grandfather, they were slaves in Brazil. They were taken, I don't know where they were taken from, but they were slaves in Brazil. And they came back and they settled in Lagos, Nigeria. That was a very long time ago. Many of these people came back with foreign names, that is Portuguese names, and they never really changed it. So my dad would always tell me these stories, and then I was this kind of child, I was kind of curious. I always asked questions. I was so fascinated in geography and just languages. Even when I was younger, I would just like, oh, this country, they speak this language, and so on and so on. So I think being idle at some point in my life led to me delving into it, and I just got interested. I was like, okay, I'm going to really learn this thing, even though I'd always dreamt as a child of learning language, and it was more like a dream come true to me. So for you, what were your first steps in learning the languages that you've learned, and what approaches did you take? Did you use an app? Did you find a tutor? Did you try a more unconventional approach?
Okay. For Hindi, since it was the first language I learned, it was a bit challenging. I used an app. I was introduced to Duolingo by a friend. So I used the app. At first, it was very difficult. To the point, everything in the language, in the Hindi I was learning, was in Hindi. Everything. Hindi is written in Devanagari script. So all the lessons were in Hindi. I couldn't understand a thing. So I had to go to YouTube to learn the alphabet, the Devanagari script. I learned it for a week. Then I came back and it became easy. everything was now facile. So for Portuguese, I use the same app Duolingo too, but with an additional, let's say, lessons from YouTube and also because it gets difficult, the grammar, everything, idioms. So I got a little help from YouTube, native speakers. Although I never really had a personal tutor, I couldn't afford it, so I had to do everything myself.
Awesome. That's a lot to learn from. But even though we're still going to break it down, for me, I think the only language I've been able to learn effectively is Portuguese. Yes, I've been able to do a little bit of German, a little bit of French and Spanish there and here and there. But I think the only one I've been able to really learn is Portuguese. And starting it, I remember I didn't even know where and how to even go about it. So I just searched on Google Play Store, learn Portuguese, blah blah blah. So there was this app I downloaded then that contained phrases. So I was learning phrases and I would memorize them. And, it's just so beautiful how things work. You're interested in something, and all of a sudden you meet somebody and it leads to something else. So I met this lady, and I think she was a music student. And, in music, they do a lot of Italian, for example, when they do their classical music and Latin too. So she was like, she knows this application that she knows that she learns the language and so on. She was telling me different things. And I was like, oh, what's the name of the application? She told me Duolingo. So that's how I got to know about Duolingo. I got the app and I was very serious with it. So I remember we've been learning was like Eu como massa, Eu bebo leche, and words like that. Like they were just very simple phrases. And about that I didn't really use YouTube at first, even though at some point I started getting comfortable and I was like, oh, how am I going to learn this language? But for my initial start, I used an app. I used an app. So can you describe your initial experiences? What were some of the early challenges and successes you encountered?
Okay. It was more of challenge. It was more challenging. It was more of challenges than success. Like at first, understanding native speakers was a problem. Speaking was an issue. So there was this time I tried speaking after learning some phrases from Duolingo, tudo bem, como estás, tudo bem. So I went to talk to a native speaker through a voice call. And I couldn't understand a thing she said because she was so fast. Latinos, the way they speak, they're usually fast. Very, very fast, rapid. Yeah, so I couldn't understand the thing. I decided to turn on airplane mode, and the call just hung up. So that was what I did. I made it seem like it was an issue with the network, the service provider. So after that, I went on YouTube to search for possible ways to learn how to understand native speakers when they speak rapidly. And one of the ways was listening to podcasts, watching movies, listening to music. So I immersed myself. I dived deeply into the language. I submit completely to the language Portuguese. I changed my phone language to Portuguese. I watched movies in Portuguese. All my music were in Portuguese. And sometimes I would just put on my headphones and listen to podcasts and news in Portuguese. That was how I was able to overcome that challenge. And for speaking, I also would speak to myself sometimes, and I made friends, foreign friends, which were patient with me, who helped me a lot, and I overcome that as well.
Well, that's quite a story and an experience. For me, I think I was just learning Duolingo for about 2-3 months. And yes, of course, there's that point where you're like, oh, when am I really going to be able to speak this language and be fluent, blah, 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 blah. And to me, I think I was just impatient. So in the process of being impatient, I went to YouTube. I kept listening to what the language sounded like. I tried looking for people that had learned Portuguese, their stories. Of course, there are not so many out there, but you'll find some videos. I can't remember the exact name of the YouTube channel, but I remember there was a man called Gavin. He was from the United States. And I was like, oh, this man speaks Portuguese so well. I wonder when I'll be able to speak Portuguese like him. And I just kept on doing it, Duolingo every day, Duolingo every day. But one day I got tired. I was like, okay, I've been learning this language for 2 or 3 months. When am I even really going to be able to speak? And then I met a lady, which is on a group that we're both on, Let's Talk World. Her name is Tokpe. So, Tokpe told me she used this app called Busu, and she shared it with me because she had a modified version that I didn't know. In fact, I didn't even know about the app before. So she shared it with me, and then I started using it to practice. And I think I practiced for about a week or two, even though I'd joined Let's Talk World at that point, because I remember that I met her from Let's Talk World. The group wasn't so active at that point, and there weren't so many people speaking English, so most people were speaking Portuguese. Um, Let me try to remember clearly, but that was like my initial experience. So the challenge was actually with conjugations because in Portuguese, verb conjugations, the verbs change a lot, especially as the tenses change. So even though at that point I couldn't even speak in past tense, I could only speak in present tense. So the verb changed a lot, and it was very, very annoying. I think the first few months, the annoying thing with the language was, okay, why is it gender based? Why are we using this and that? Why does this have to change? Why does this have to change? Many things that aren't in English were there. And I realized that when it comes to language learning, one thing we really need to pay attention to is, or one thing we really need to accept is that the language you're learning is different from the language you speak. And the earlier you can accept that language is different, the better it is. Because if you keep thinking, oh, why is it like that? Why is it like that? It will impede you from really learning the language. So those were my challenges from the onset. So next question, what strategies and method did you find most effective for your learning journey? Did you focus on vocabulary, grammar, conversation, or a combination?
It was a combination. I think everyone should try to find a suitable reading learning strategy for himself, for themselves. For me, what helped me was I made a timetable of what to do each day of the week. Like, let's say Monday, vocabulary, Tuesday, grammar, Wednesday, listening, Thursday, speaking, and so on and so forth. So I follow the timetable every day, and it helped me. But I think it was personal. Others may find this a bit cumbersome. I don't know. So you have to look for what works for you. So what worked for you?
Okay, so for me, I never actually had to study grammar on its own or learn vocabulary on its own. I think I was just generally learning the language, and I had Busu with me. So I didn't even need to start dividing things. All I just needed to do was like, okay, I know, okay, there are various levels when it comes to language learning. We have A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And I remember that, okay, I was like, oh, I'm going to get to B1, B2, blah, 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 blah. And of course, the way Busu is structured, it had that level kind of. So I felt like, okay, if this is an application and it's a course, it will obviously help me. So what I was doing was I was learning with Duolingo, learning with Busu. Busu was very straightforward, and it didn't have many repetitions. But Duolingo, of course, repeated things over and over and over. So it helped me to help me to recall those words, remember them, remember the grammar and everything. But I was not learning grammar directly. I think I was just focusing on making sentences, looking at sentence structure. Okay, why did they use this word and how? And one thing that really helped me again is chatting a lot with people. I remember because in the earlier stages, Let's Talk World was actually Let's Talk Africa. So, and there was also Let's Talk Beginners or Start. Let's Talk Start. So for Let's Talk Start was the second group for beginners. I was also there, and the people there talked a lot. So we used to chat a lot in Portuguese. I would make mistakes, they would correct me. And I also had friends who I would chat with, and they would give me feedback. Don't use this, use that. This is not correct, this is correct. And I had Orlando once in a while. We had calls, and we had those meetings where you say things, and we're like, no, don't say that. You say it this way. So for me, it was a combination of all these things, and over time, it worked. And one thing again that worked for me, just like you did, was I changed my phone language to Portuguese then. But I think I'd been studying the language for about 5 months because I tried it once when I was around 4 months, 3 months. It was hell. So I changed it back to English. I couldn't cope. Then 6 months down the line, I actually did it again, and it was more convenient, even though it was not completely convenient, because the truth about that, our brain will always kick against change. So I was like, okay, this time around, I'm going to just do it. And I kept it for some time. After some time, I just got used to it. And my phone was in Portuguese for a very long time until I started working, that I started teaching because I needed to do some things. And I just felt like, okay, let my phone be in English once again. That was when I changed it back to English. So it was a combination for me. So how did you maintain motivation when progress felt slow or challenging? What kept you going through the plateaus and difficulties?
Well, I have to say it's not easy. For you to, before you learn a language, make sure you have passion for it. Make sure you love it. That's what kept me going. There was a time I gave up for more than 2 months while learning Portuguese because it was too difficult. Like you said, verb conjugation. I couldn't comprehend the thing, pretérito imperfeito, pretérito perfeito, subjuntivo. It was just overwhelming. So I had to let go. I was like, Portuguese is not for me. So I had a friend. I hadn't been participating in the group at that time. So he came to me directly, like, what's going on? I told him that I can't do it anymore. It's just too much. It's just too much for me to take. He encouraged me that you can do it. He advised me. We talked and I resumed back my learning. The strategies I told you about, I applied it and it worked. Those were the challenges I experienced.
Okay, so for me, what kept me motivated and how did I maintain my motivation? I think just like you, I had a lot of inconsistencies. There were times when I would go a whole week or two without even learning a thing. But one thing I kept doing was I kept listening to music. I think one thing that really helped anybody learning any language to be motivated, to continue being motivated, is keep consuming or keep taking in content in the language. You can listen to music, you can look at the lyrics. You don't necessarily have to understand the words. When you see new words, maybe once in a while you can check their meaning, or maybe see verb form you've never seen before, you can check their meaning. Even till today, I still see lots of words while listening to songs, and I'm like, oh, I don't know this. What does this even mean? Or maybe I've seen them before and I can't remember their meaning. So one thing that actually kept me going was I maintained contact with those people that could speak the language. I also maintained contact with content in the language. That is, I watched movies, I listened to songs, and once in a while I checked YouTube, okay, how do I do this, how do I do that? Even though I wasn't like consistent at some point, but it just kept me going. And that's how I went through those plateaus and difficulties. So what role the cultural... Okay. You
I have
want
to
to
say
say something?
Yes. For the 2 months I gave up on Portuguese, I have to say this. If you're learning the language and you're really serious about it, do not let go of the language. If not, for the 2 months I let go of Portuguese, when I came back, it was like starting everything afresh. Everything had gone away. Like there was nothing left in Portuguese that I could remember. All I had learned went away. So if you're learning the language, make sure to be motivated all the time. Like at least once a week. Keep in touch with the language, just like you said. It's really, really important.
Yes, very important. So what role did cultural immersion play in your language learning? Did you travel? Did you engage with native speakers online? Did you consume media in the target language?
Well, unfortunately, I've never traveled to Brazil before, even though I would love to. Yeah, I loved reading about Brazilian culture and watching movies about it. There's a series called Cidade Invisível. I don't know if you've seen it before. It's about,
I watched the 1 and 2. Yes, I did.
yeah, it's about Brazilian, what's it called? Lendas do Brasil. So I watched it. I saw many vocabularies. I learned new words from it, which also helped me. And then I talked to native speakers, of course, about their food, their traditional dish. As you know, each region of Brazil has its own kind of food. So I would talk to like a person from Rio de Janeiro, as a typical Brazilian, what kind of food you like. You'll tell me, this one will tell me. So that's how I got to know about the likes and dislikes of Brazilians and about their culture.
Okay, so for me, I think I did similar things. One thing I love to mention is that you don't have to go to a country to learn the language. You know, people always ask me this question: how are you able to learn Portuguese and speak it so fluently if you've never been there before? And in fact, the way we speak the languages, you would think, oh, these people have traveled before, or they have a family member that speak the language to them. No, we learned it as adults, and it's very possible to learn a language and be fluent in it in your own country without traveling. And the internet has made it so easy. So one thing I would say cultural immersion did to me is, for me, I think a friend of mine was just so, should I say he was intentional in teaching me slangs, and me seeing those slangs in movies, because when you begin to watch movies, I think I've watched 3 or 4 Brazilian movies series precisely because I don't like watching short movies, even though I've watched movies, but most of the time um it's usually series. So I watch like maybe 20 episodes or even up to 40 sometimes. And my favorite Brazilian series still remains 3%, Tres Porcentos. And for me, I really loved it. I learned a lot of words. Words, in fact, I think I watched that movie twice, because the first time I watched it, I didn't really understand a thing. I was watching it with um English subtitles. But the second time I watched it with Portuguese subtitles. And at some point, I just removed the subtitles and I realized that I could understand it better. Even though up till now, there are times when they speak, especially when native to native people are speaking informally, I still find it difficult to understand some words because they begin to use a lot of short forms and a lot of nasal sounds, and you're like, what are these people saying? They're talking so fast. But even though I understand majority of what they say, and yes, I learned about food. There were people that were just so intentional. They would love to, and Brazilians love talking about their culture. They love talking about their country, their music, and so on. So those things were really helpful and kept me going, even when I didn't feel like. So it was not all about just grammar, vocabulary. Culture was also involved. So can you share a memorable experience or turning point that significantly accelerated your progress? A breakthrough moment or a trip or a conversation?
Well, for me, I would have to say it was my conversation with Orlando after I had given up on Portuguese. Yeah. So he was the one actually who came to my DM, asking me what had happened. So I explained everything to him. At that time, I was in my second year studying civil engineering, of course. So everything coupling together. I didn't have much time, and I had a lot on my plate. So he came to me, asked what happened. I explained everything to him. Yeah, he now came down to my level. He is also an advanced English speaker, so he understands how things are. So he came down to my level. He saw things from my own perspective, and at that time, I was new in Let's Talk Africa. So I was kind of like, let me say, shy to talk in meetings. I was afraid to make mistakes. So he told me, like, it's okay to make mistakes. We are all learning here. We know how things are. We won't laugh at you because that was what I was afraid of. No one will. So I tried a one-on-one meeting with him. After that time, I got comfortable with him. We would talk for some time. He actually changed my life. He changed my Portuguese journey. That was a turning point in my journey. And afterwards, I started participating in meetings, talking on the group. Yeah, and I felt comfortable. After that point, I felt comfortable.
So for me, my turning point was joining Let's Talk. I remember I was looking forward to speak with. I met this guy, Joao, even though we are no longer in touch. But
After meeting Joanne, we would talk from time to time, talk about several things. Then finally, I received the message because I posted, "Oh, you want to practice Portuguese? I can speak English. Let's be conversation partner on Hello Talk." And then Orlando entered my DM, and he sent a message that would I love to practice my Portuguese every weekend? And I was like, yes. And before I knew what was going on, I was in a group. The group was still scanted then, and people were not really talking. So I would say at that point, I was more like the most active member. And really, I think the reading practice was one of my invention in the group, actually. So it was something I actually suggested in the group, and then we began to do it, and the feedback and everything. It all started with me. And I remember our mini lessons with Orlando. And all these things I was doing then, which are many of the things that we still do today in Let's Talk World, are the foundation of the group, and they're going on. I was actually so interested in learning that I was like, okay, let us even set structure. Even though I was not doing it intentionally, but it worked. I unconsciously set the structures, and I was so involved with them because there was also a group then, Let's Talk World. We read every single day, and we had feedback. And one thing reading does to us is that it opens our minds, open our mouth, and allows us to exercise those muscles that even when the words that we normally would not use, or not words I would not normally say, so our mouths kind of get accustomed to those sounds. So that was the way I got better. And another thing I'd love to mention is at some point, I became an admin, and I had to start organizing meetings, that is, being a host in meetings. And for me, I had to do it in Portuguese because that was the language I was learning. So from there, I was able to gain confidence. Before I knew what, boom, I was very fluent. I didn't even know how I became fluent. I can't precisely say this is when I became fluent, but it was a process. So the next question is, what were some of the unexpected benefits or surprises you discovered as you became more fluent, and how did language learning impact other areas of your life?
Okay. For me, the surprises were actually I got to meet new friends, make international friends. I honestly didn't know there were nice people in this world anymore. I didn't know nice people still existed in this world until I met Brazilians. It was a surprise to me, actually. It was really a surprise. I didn't expect it. You know, the way things are here in our country, no one is exactly nice. So when I met them, they were like extra nice. They were jovial, they were friendly, and all of that. So it was a surprise to me. And for the area of Portuguese impacting my life, it opened my eyes to see a world, a different world, a world I would never have seen if I hadn't begun learning my languages. If I hadn't begun my language journey. So it opened my eyes. It brought knowledge. It's kind of like difficult to explain unless you've experienced it before. I believe you know what I'm talking about.
Totally. So for me, yes. You want to say something?
Go ahead.
Okay, so for me, I would say lots of benefit and a lot of surprises. Just like you said, relationships with people, having to meet new people that are so loving and kind, and they're like, oh, is this really possible? Because yes, even apart from Nigeria, many countries, even in Europe, people are not that kind. I even think people in Portugal are quite kind too, because I've related with a few people in Portugal. I'm like, okay, maybe it's a Lusophone thing, that countries that speak Portuguese thing. I remember I had this friend, Israel. We'll chat from morning till night. In fact, it was with Israel that my Portuguese went to the next level, because I would always chat to him, because Orlando would go to work and he gets busy. But I was always with Israel. Israel was home, I was home. And so we're both chatting all the time. And we would we would so much disturb the group with so many messages. And we would tag people from time to time and do our reading practice and go back to our DMs and continue. So it was really a lot. And many of that benefits was that sometimes when I was in difficulties, I received unexpected help. They would help. And I was like, how is this even possible? And I began to teach English from time to time, and I was able to impact life. So the next question is, how has achieving fluency changed your perspective on language learning and communication in general?
Well, I learned Hindi at first, but I've got to say I'm not that fluent. I'm more fluent in Portuguese than in Hindi. So, to say this, I've got to say, my perspective about language fluency kind of changed when I started learning Portuguese after I became fluent in Portuguese. I never believed I would be this fluent, actually. I never believed it. So, in general, I oh my goodness. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
I think my network is
I can hear you perfectly.
hello?
I can hear you perfectly.
Well, right now.
Yes.
Okay, right. This thing went off. It's back on now. So could you repeat the question, please?
Okay. So the question was, how was achieving fluency change your perspective on language learning and communication in general?
Well, based on the aspect of communication, I wasn't really talking to people like that because of my level of fluency. I was kind of timid and shy. But right now, after achieving fluency, I can host meetings, I can talk to people. It has completely changed my perspective on language learning. I never really believed it was possible for me to be this fluent while learning a language, and I'm not in the country where that language is being spoken, or I'm not around people who speak the language. So after being fluent, my whole idea about that completely changed. I now believe it's completely possible. You can do the impossible whilst you're still here. You haven't been to that country, you haven't gone anywhere. You can actually do anything.
I totally agree. Same here. It changed my perspective about that. And for me, I think it actually birthed a lot of things because it was more like a domino effect. So it was more like I learned this, it led to something else, it led to something else, and then all of a sudden it led to all that I do today. So I can attribute about maybe 40% to 60% of the things I do today to just learning a language. And now it's time for us to go to advice and insight. So it's time for us to advise people on that are starting their language journey. What kind of advice would we give to them? And what are the key principles or mindsets you would tell them to adopt?
Well, first of all, I'll tell them that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. So you have to make up your mind. It's either you start and don't give up, or you don't start at all. Because if you start and give up, when you come back, it's be like starting all over again. So it's better not to start than to start and give up. Then, if you're learning a language which has other alphabets, like let's say Korean, Hindi, Greek, Hebrew, first of all, you have to take your time to learn the alphabets first. That's the best thing to do, the first and the best thing to do. You know, there are others who can speak Hindi, they can't write it. Who can speak Chinese, they can't write it. There are four aspects of learning a language: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So before learning the language, if it's a language that has its own alphabet, take your time and learn the alphabet first. That's the first part. Then the second part is immerse yourself, dive yourself completely in the language. Thinking, your day-to-day activities. Even when there's no one to talk to, you can try speaking to yourself. Yeah, that helps. I did it. It helped me too. And also, I would recommend Duolingo. Yeah, it helped me. Duolingo, Busuu, YouTube. You can search for tutorials and then look for native speakers with whom you can practice, because that is also important. That is my advice to those out there trying to learn a new language.
Okay, so I'll give the same advice to anyone to practice and just keep on practicing. No practice is a waste. Of course, you can increase the level, you can increase the intensity, but no practice is a waste. And look for a way to incorporate it into your life, your daily life, the things you love doing. For example, for me, I love singing. I love listening to songs. So what I did was just put it there, and it helped a lot. In fact, I would say about 20% of my vocabulary or my fluency came from listening to languages and listening to songs. And it actually helped me with listening too, because automatically when you're listening to songs, you practice listening. For speaking, I was participating in meetings that I actually went beyond my limits. I just made sure I just kept on speaking, and it really helped a lot. For reading also helps. It helps a lot because you can hear yourself and your mispronunciation. You can also exercise those muscles, because we pronounce those words, and sometimes because of our native languages we can't pronounce them correctly, or there's something just different. But the more you read, or the more you say those words, the better you become at saying them. And just like you said, don't give up no matter what. Just keep on going. And another thing I would love to let people know is that this journey is a slow one. It's not going to be boom. It takes time. So just be patient. As much as you are impatient, be patient in your impatience. That's what I'm going to say. So are there any specific resources or tools you would love to recommend? And yes, websites, apps, communities, etc.
Well, first of all, I would recommend if it's a language like Portuguese, you can join Let's Talk World. It's gonna help. Then, for websites, you have this website called Alison Courses. It offers free lessons in any of the language you want to learn. Although it's not that advanced, just for beginners, that could be a start for you. Then you could search for more apps like Duolingo, but Duolingo is one of them. I recommend it. Then YouTube is also one of them. Then podcasts like this one, but in the language you're learning. You can listen to podcasts to enhance your listening, to make you understand when native speakers speak better. And then the YouTube, you can also see some idioms and slangs native speakers tend to use when they are speaking informally. So these are the tools I would recommend.
Yes. And another thing I would love to mention is that you don't necessarily have to understand everything. All you just need to do is keep it up, keep doing what you're doing. You will not understand everything at once. There are times when you feel lost, a time when it seems as though you're dumb, but just keep on going. That's really my own advice again. So I used Busu, and there's this app I use then, LinkU. It contains many texts of different levels. You can read them there in different languages, and they are written by native speakers and tutors, that is professionals. And yes, is there anything I'm missing? Hello Talk. That's another application. Hello Talk. You can always use Hello Talk. Okay, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just about to mention Hello Talk, but you already said it. And then there's Tandem for those living outside Nigeria, because it's not available in Nigeria.
Yes, and that's very sad. So, let's talk a little bit about you. What are your future language learning goals? Do you plan to maintain fluency, explore new languages, or perhaps you even want to teach?
Well, I can't say what the future holds, but for now, my plans are to keep on learning more and more languages, at least 20, like including Greek and Hebrew. I really, really would love to speak those languages. Yeah. So for now, those are my plans, but I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I might be teaching some of these languages in the future, but for now, I can't see that happening.
Okay, so for me, yes, I tend to learn more. And of course, I keep learning, even though I've not been consistent with many of them. but it's been an experience. And yes, I intend to teach. In fact, I'm going to start a Portuguese free class very soon before I start paid classes. I intend to teach French too. In fact, I've been teaching French. My knowledge of French has earned me quite a bit, even though not much, but it's something to compensate as at least I have the knowledge. It's not going to waste. And then being able to speak Portuguese has helped me to be able to teach English to Brazilians, to Portuguese people, to French people, to even people in Germany and other countries. And it's been an awesome experience. So I intend to perhaps travel and do many things with the language generally. So that's actually my goal. So do you have anything you would love to say? Any extra thing? Or perhaps you think we've not touched on anything yet?
Well, you've said it all, actually. You've said it all. Well, one more thing for those intending to learn the language, make sure you really, really love the language, because it's important. It's what has kept me ongoing while learning all these languages. Like French, for example. I've been battling with French since I don't know when. Because why? I do not love the language. So it's been a problem.
Battle.
It has been a problem to focus, to keep going. I can't remember the last time I practiced French. Not that it's difficult, just that I don't love it. I have no passion for it. So before you learn the language, make sure you love it.
Yes, French has been a lot to me too. Even though, of course, I understand a bit of it, I can write a bit, but I just feel like, okay, what am I really doing? The love for it is not just there, it's not flowing. And I'm like, okay. So, yes, love the language, and love the language. So, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much, Frank, for your time. I really, really, really appreciate